Oh my God. I was thinking about this in the shower this morning, and I said this to you before we started. I said 5 years ago, if you had told me that Natasha Elisa was going to be on my podcast, that we would have reconnected in 2022, I would have said, I'm sorry, psychic. I want my $5 back.
That's a problem. You're paying a $5 psychic. Pony up, Sarah.
Yeah. Get a $200 one, for God's sake, you cheap woman. All right. Well, let me do it. This is like going to be a big moment. So, for people that just heard that name, you know her, she is a mother. She is a writer. She is incredibly talented. She's an artist. We're survivors of life. And she's a survivor. And you probably also may most famously know her as Kane's former wife. So she is here. I knew her for years on the radio, years and years and years and years, and behind the scenes as a friend. And then, life happened.
Right? Just a little ... there. Fill in the blank.
So, okay, here we are. How are you?
I know. It's amazing. Gosh, Sarah, I can't believe it. Like, seriously, if you would have told me 5, especially 10 years ago, when did you leave the show? How many years ago was that?
Okay, so I left the Kane show in 2013. I started in
10 years ago.
10 years ago. And I started in 2007. So I was there for 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. If you would have told me 10 years ago that this is where we would be now. Wow.
I never would have believed it. Would you?
No, I wouldn't. I would have thought that life was going to continue on with the way it was for the rest of my life.
We have 10 years to catch up in a podcast episode. Certainly not that we can't do 100 more after this, but we're going to have to do a part A, B, C, D, because people are going to want the whole story. This is such a broad question. But overall, I think people are, one, to begin with, curious. How are you?
I'm amazing. I am at peace. I'm genuinely happy and calm and in a place that I never thought that I'd get to, which is insane once you fill in that ... of 10 years. But, it's a gift from God is all I can say, that we're here right now and I can actually say those words.
Okay. So Kane passed away a little over a year ago. Well,
yeah, it was in March was the 1-year anniversary.
1.5 year anniversary. Yeah, it's actually going on almost 2 years. So it's like 1.5 years. Losing somebody, and we'll get into your feelings about this. How was it, losing him? Let's just talk about him for a minute, because obviously Kane is the reason we came together, right? What was it like, with him passing? Because you guys had been divorced how many years?
Oh my gosh, you're going to make me cry right off the bat. You're not even going to buy me a drink first.
I have all my tissues ready. I knew I was going to cry because, okay, this is a little all over the place. Actually, before we talk about Kane, I want to ask you your intention for this interview, because I have an intention, which will probably make me cry.
My intention, that's actually very clear to me. My intention has been for many years now to use the pain and the awfulness that I went through and my family went through to help somebody else out who is in the midst of it right now. That's it.
My God, such a good intention.
You have to make good of it. Otherwise, what was the point? Yes, you survived, but there has to be more to it, right? There has to be a bigger plan for what's happened. I just don't believe that God would send us through all of that for, shits and giggles. I don't think I should say shits and giggles when I say God in the same sentence, but he knows me. He made me.
That's such a great intention. And you will. To me, this interview is the start for you of, when I met you, my God, which was like 15 years ago. You were always just this fabulous, stylish Florida girl. I mean, tons of personality and always sort of had your own thing aside from the radio. And you were a great writer. And you guys were such this fun couple at first. We all had fun all the time. We all went to Tampa together. We went to Vegas together. We all,
we really were a family. That wasn't just, the persona we put out there on the radio. I really thought of us as a family. We were all far away from our actual families and going through this new experience together, and we bonded over it.
We did. And you had such a strong voice there. So I know then, and I know now you're going to have such an even stronger voice. And this is going to be the start of helping a lot of people.
Oh, thank you.
And my intention for this interview too was I want the best for you and the girls. I want the rest of your lives to be so fun and filled with so much joy. Okay, now I'm going to cry. I do. I want him to.
You did it first.
I want it to be so special. And I actually wanted to do this interview because in a crazy way, I wanted to honor Kane in the sense of being true, to the entire story of what Kane was. But also, I think I said this to you, for me, the turning point of anger towards Kane and iHeartRadio and all that was realizing he never really got to enjoy all the success, and by success, I mean, having two beautiful, healthy daughters, yes, there was financial success, but that is sad, to me. So, okay, I'm not going to cry after this. But
I mean, it's
that was my
true, and it breaks my heart too. And that's, one of the things I've talked to the girls about is Daddy is at peace now. He always struggled with his anxiety, and, he was diagnosed with moderate obsessive compulsive disorder and depression. And he's at peace from all of that right now because he didn't get to enjoy it,
And I think that's the part that people don't realize. I certainly spent a lot of time being so angry and publicly trashing him. And because I was really angry. I was so mad. I didn't want to speak to you. I didn't want to speak to anybody associated with that for years. And also, I mean, there was a very vindictive part of Kane. I mean, you know it, unfortunately, better than all of us. But there was a fear of I don't want to be back around, because Eric had said this to me. Why have you never reached out to me after all these years? We were friends for years, Eric from the show. I said, Eric, I don't want to be anywhere around him. I don't want to be in his realm.
My goodness.
I don't want to pop up on his radar. I don't want, because you just never knew with Kane. I mean, he was,
and honestly, that was one of the hardest parts after we split up was I didn't just lose him, but I lost all of you guys. I was the banished one, and I was mad at that for a long time. Whether it was you or Danny or Eric or everybody, I was poison and tainted goods. And it's because everybody was terrified of the ramifications that would come from, angering him. But I understand it. I get it now. That was hard to work through, but especially hearing you say it right now, I 100% get it. But yeah, it was really lonely.
Tell us, okay, so obviously, I remember, and tell me if this is true, when you guys were first together and you got married, because you got married, I think in what, 2007? 2008?
Yeah, 2000, we got engaged in 2006. So yeah, 2007. We met when, oh my gosh, in 2019, when I was 19 years old and he had his first gig doing nights at 93.3 FLZ in Tampa. I was taking a tour of the radio station. I actually went there to go and kind of meet another DJ that I had a crush on. I called in all the time requesting Matchbox 20 and, was smitten with him. But I walked by the FLZ studio and Peter saw me and I saw him and that was it,
And okay, wait, that would have been, was that 1999? I think you
that
said
was 1999. Sorry,
okay.
1999.
1999. So I'm assuming the first couple of years, was your marriage good at the start? and then it went
Oh
down.
my gosh. I've posted online. I'm a single mom again. I'm working on my second.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. But
what
I'm getting to with that is, you know, I'm not the best chooser. You would think I would pick up on the red flags at the beginning. And Peter and I, yes, we dated since I was 19 and he was 22, 23, but there were so many red flags. We broke up, every 6 months, and then we get back together and then break up. It was very, some parts were toxic, but it was also very passionate. And it was a roller coaster ride. Even when we were dating in that, lovey-dovey period that's supposed to be easy. I guess I just thought that once we got married, then it would be easier. Or maybe once we had a first child, it'd be easier. Well, maybe a second child, it'll be easier. And it just never got easier.
When do you think the first time was that you really knew? And maybe this wasn't until recently, but when do you think the moment was you really knew oh, he's got something wrong bigger than, hey, we don't compromise together? When did you feel like you knew something mentally was kind of really wrong with him?
So this would have been, let's see, Soph was born in 2010. So this probably would have been about 2012 or so, a year or so, maybe 2 years before we separated. And he was making really good money by then. But
I know I was making good money, so he was making better. I was making good money.
I mean, when we got here, we were scraping together pennies because it was just starting out. But by then, the show was massive and successful. And at home, he lived in this fear that it was never enough, that we were going to be broke at any moment, that he could be fired at any moment. This is a man who was number one across the board. Everything that he touched turned to gold. And at home, he was always afraid that it was just never going to be enough. And I remember we were in marriage counseling, and it was over money stuff that, I wanted to move and buy a new house, and it just absolutely terrified him. And the therapist asked him, what dollar amount is going to be enough that you don't have to worry anymore? And there was no dollar amount. He couldn't answer it. Or what success in your ratings is going to be enough that you can, take it easy a little bit, that you can't get fired tomorrow. That's just not a realistic thing that's going to happen. And there wasn't that point for him. Because of his mental illness, that just wasn't, at that point, it wasn't even diagnosed, much less being treated. He could just never be at peace with where we were. And I think at that point, I realized there's something a lot bigger going on here. He's not just a jerk sometimes. There's something maybe chemically wrong, something bigger than him that is causing all of these things.
And when you were together, or maybe post together, was he ever actually diagnosed with something? I mean, I can remember.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't remember. I think you were on the show then, were you not, when we did the NBC4 interview, The Changing Minds with Doreen? She used to do, this mental health segment. I don't know if she does it anymore. And she came to the house and interviewed us. And he went public about his diagnosis and what it was like.
No, you know what? It's funny. I don't think I was there. I feel like I remember that interview, hearing about it or seeing it, but I feel like it was post. I think it was after I left.
Sarah.
P.S.
Sarah apocalypse.
Yeah, it's post Sarah. Yeah. Okay. I do. And I do remember that. And so it was what, bipolar or what?
No, it was moderate obsessive compulsive disorder. And he also struggled with, mild depression, clinical depression from time to time, and severe anxiety. But, the real shame of it is, at that point, he could have maybe gotten the help that he needed, but oh gosh, I have to think about how much I want to say about this. But, the fame is the devil. And the doctor that he saw, as soon as he found out that who his client was, and, Peter, or, Kane, was more than happy to talk about who this was that was helping him so much, was more than willing to pump him full of drugs that would make him feel better, whether it was the uppers, and it was ADHD as well that he was diagnosed with. So, whether uppers like Adderall or downers like Valium, he really just allowed Peter to slide into those addictive medications versus the medications that maybe could have really helped, and the hard therapy that could have helped, but maybe didn't make you feel good right in the moment, wasn't, a quick fix. And Peter was so driven by work that, he wanted a quick fix so he could just keep going. And, oh man, I think all the time about suing that doctor, getting his license taken away, reporting him to the FDA. I don't know what the channels are, because all the way up and, that was, oh gosh, probably 2012, 2013. And up until Peter passed away, he was still prescribing all those medications for him, the same psychiatrist.
Wow. My God. And I mean,
absolutely horrible.
Yes, because Peter got worse. I mean, I would,
absolutely, you get worse.
Those the stories. I mean, you guys got divorced. Danny left the show. I mean, Kane ended up, leaving the show in whatever capacity it got worse.
It absolutely got worse. And that man was in a position where not only could he have made him better, but it was his ethical responsibility to do everything to make him better. But, people, gosh, I can't imagine being like a real celebrity, like Kim Kardashian or, Angelina Jolie, somebody actually big, because in our little bubble of, a local celebrity in the DMV was enough to be absolutely fucking toxic.
Oh, I know. You can understand how celebrities get to the point they become paranoid and they do spiral, because it's like, who can it is so hard to trust anyone. Because
people will give you whatever you want. I was watching the Michael Jackson documentary the other day. People will give you whatever you want just to be a part of that world. And that happened in our world.
It totally did. And I would remember that. I mean, one of the challenges with Kane was, no one could become more famous. Like, everything was good until the show was number one and started being syndicated everywhere. And then you're right. Then everything changes. Like, everyone's celebrating you all the time and it's whatever you want. And then I don't know if it was probably a combination of things. I don't know if it was our bosses or probably Kane's mental state too, but it was like no one could become more popular than Kane. So if Sammy had a TV gig, he would make Sammy's life miserable. If we would go out and people would recognize me before him, he'd make my life miserable. But knowing his mental health, like, there were so many layers to that,
so many layers, and it wasn't just that doctor, because he was completely addicted to Ambien, even taking it during the day, and he was passed out during the show on a couch. They had to carry him out of the studio. How do the bosses not step in at that point? And it's because he was making massive amounts of money for them. So it's, cover it up. Let's get him up and back to the microphone and just keep going. And I mean, listen, he's no completely innocent victim. He was also a massive narcissist and,
yeah, right. And
very vindictive to a lot of people, including yourself. But there were a lot of people around who could have stepped in much, much sooner. But I believe they didn't, because he was lining everybody's pockets.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my big regrets is, like, I wish that I had, I was 31 when I left. I started going to therapy, I think when I was 28 or 29. And my therapist is the one that was like, you're basically in a relationship with an abusive husband, Did
your therapist really say that?
Yeah. She said, because towards the end, we would go in and one day Kane would be like, great. It would be like old times. And the next day you'd go in, he wouldn't even speak to us. There wasn't a good morning. He would be drinking Red Bull with his back to you, eating combos, and he wouldn't speak until the mic went on. He wouldn't speak to you. And then after the show, he would like unleash. You didn't do enough show prep. What do you think this fucking is? You could be replaced at any time. We can find a new Sarah. He would just like go off.
And I bet you sat with anxiety the entire show, knowing what was coming.
I would drive into that parking lot by the time I left, and sit in the parking lot for a few minutes and talk myself, like, you can go upstairs, you can do this. Like, but my therapist is the one that I thought it was me. I thought, well, when I started
he was very good at making everybody think it was you. I thought it was me too.
Yeah, I mean, I would go to therapy. I was like, I don't know, maybe I need to work harder. My therapist would be like, you work 15 hours a day. Like that's not normal. Like you don't need to work anymore. Well, but if I just did one more War the Roses story, like maybe that would make him, she's like, no, this is, she's like, this isn't a man who comes in and tells you I love you and then punches you in the face. This is not you. You have to leave this situation because it's not going to get better. My regret is not, I never went to our bosses and sat down. The one time I did complain, which was then one of the catalysts for me leaving, was I had finally taken it so long. And I went to say, look, this is not normal behavior. And the boss at the time had said, okay, I hear you. And then the next day called me in and said, look, Kane has accidentally recorded this recording of you and Sammy talking about him in the studio when he left. And you can't be on tape saying the things that you were saying about him and want him to change.
Accidentally.
And I was like, if this, my friend, for 6 years would do this to me and hold on to this recording to use it against me, what the frig else does he have? And that was for me the moment I said, okay, I have to go. But I wish I had really sat down. I didn't know enough then what I know now, like, of course, what I know now, I never would sit, I never would have.
This was pre-Me Too and Time's Up and everything else,
So I wish I'd really, had tried to get him help too, because for me, I think about now in owning my own podcast and being out here in Hollywood. And, it's so hard to have the amazing chemistry that we all had. And truly the sky was the limit. If it had been a different, time and place, I mean, we could have been the biggest radio show in the country, but it wasn't.
It really was something special, wasn't it?
It was.
I mean, like you said, I was listening to your other podcast, The 3 Things You Learned About Kane, and it really was lightning in a bottle.
Oh my God. I mean, of course, this better than anyone. I mean, he'd show prep for 5 hours a day, but I mean, the truth is you could have woken us, the 4 of us, up in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. We could have done any show anywhere. It would have been entertaining as hell. Sammy is one of the funniest comedians, greatest people. Eric was so good at his job. Mel was yeah. Tell me this, when did you guys get divorced? And, that was so public. What was it like going through that publicly? And what was your truth of the actual divorce that you can share?
Wow. That's a big question. It was hell. When we first separated, which would have been about 2013, and this is all, I've talked about this on my blog or on my Instagram, but, we sat down and said, okay, this is it. We're going to separate. So before we separated, the reason we separated was, I told him I couldn't take it anymore. The addiction issues, whether it was the alcohol or the medications, because like you said, you never knew which one you were going to get. And it was the same way at home. And I said, so it's us or that. Like, you either get help or we're out, we're done, because it was becoming abusive. It was just a miserable, toxic place for me and 2 very small little girls at the time to be living in. And I remember the next day was my birthday, and I woke up and he told me, you can go, that's it. We're done. We're getting divorced then, if that's the ultimatum you're going to give me. So at that point, we stayed in the same house together for a little while, and it was hell. At some point I had to pack bags and go stay in a hotel room, and I took out a bunch of cash. So I paid for nothing with a credit card because I knew that he would find me, track credit cards through bank accounts. And, the girls and I hid out for a little while, still was in communication with him so he could talk to his daughters, but it just became so horribly toxic and emotionally abusive at home that I just couldn't stay there anymore. That was That was the rock bottom. This is one part that maybe we'll cut out later at some point,
fine.
and you tell me if you want me to tell you the story or not. But did I ever tell you the story about when John and Peter stole my car while we were hiding out in the hotel room?
I think I heard it third party or something.
Yeah. Do you even want me to go there, or you just want to like nix that?
No, I say
We
don't
don't need to
bring
leave.
John. Like, I think don't bring any. If we can just, because
Yeah, let me start that part over again.
Okay, let me make
I won't even get into that part. You want to just like ask me again, or
yeah. Well, I liked
that's a whole rabbit hole right there.
Yeah. That okay, wait. No, the credit cards is good. Why don't we keep that? I would just go from you guys hid out for a while and then pick it up from there. But yeah, I wouldn't even mention John or any of those people.
Oh gosh, I fucking hate him.
I know.
You know what? For the girls' birthdays this year, he sent them this is a person who just, and I'll just say this just to leave it out. But he sent them I got the emails, but I made a donation in your name on behalf of memorializing Peter Deibler for, and then he sent it to some charity. It had nothing to do with mental health or anything, but like he made a donation for Peter in their name on their birthdays. I'm like, fuck you. You haven't been around there like since you guys were on the show together. You haven't seen them since they were toddlers, and you want to play this like angel now, like I'm gonna, memorialize your father. Like he was a part of killing Peter. But
oh, totally. Oh, please. Yeah. They were yeah.
They still do mornings, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
I hope you can't hear the dog dreaming in her sleep. She's whimpering in her sleep.
That dog's so cute. I don't know. Then I feel like, oh, maybe you should mention him. I mean, he's a public figure, so it's kind of like you can say, whatever is the truth. But I don't know. I don't know John really, so I don't know if he's like.
It's probably not worth it because he's completely kissed ass to Peter's dad, and Peter's dad like got upset at me once because I mentioned on Instagram that he kept the girl's dog. John kept Skittles, the girl's dog, with Peter and would not give him back to us. And I mentioned it when I posted about getting June, and people were like, what happened to Skittles? I was like, well, we weren't allowed to keep him. And they're like, well, John's posting pictures of how he adopted Kane's dog. He's such a fucking savior. No, we weren't allowed to keep Skittles. So the girls and I despise how he has used Peter's death as a promotion for himself.
And maybe you can say that like at some point as a general.
If we get into like actually when he died and like what happened after that, I can mention that.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
And probably just easier. Like I liked what you did with management. I mean, if it's broad strokes, then it's not like about one, you know what I mean? It's like,
I know, I don't want to get sued.
Yeah, right. Neither of us. Yeah. Who cares?
Was that too far with iHeart, or was that okay?
I was thinking about that. I might just edit it out because, to be honest, the truth of the matter is I really don't know how much they did know or not know. I think it sounds like to you, they never did try to get him help, but I can't honestly say.
Well, they just turned a blind eye. They had to know. How could they not know?
I mean, they did know 100%
during the middle of a show.
Yeah. Multiple times it sounds like. So they did know, but,
we'll see. I don't know. I don't care either way if you take it out or not. I mean,
karma.
iHeart.
To me, karma always comes back like around. And anyway, that's a whole nother thing. Okay, pick it up from you guys. I'll just say it. I'll kind of set it back up. Okay. So you guys were you'd left, you're hiding out, you were being very careful about your money because you didn't want Kane to kind of know where you guys were staying. And all right. And then what happened from there? Because obviously I'm going to ask you about, it went very public, your divorce, like he came on air, made an announcement.
Oh, that's true. Maybe I should just back up before the whole hotel thing. When we were still in the same house together and it wasn't, completely just relentless attacks on each other. It was, we sat down and said, okay, he has this big public image. I really enjoyed, Little Pink Monsters, my blog and my social media. I wanted to keep that going. So let's hire a PR rep to help us put out a statement together, one of those ones celebrities always do about how we'll always love each other and we're going to co-parent like angels, blah, blah, blah. So we were going to do that. And I remember we decided that day. And the next morning I woke up to just being inundated with messages about what a horrible gold digging, whore that I was. And how could I do this to Kane? And I was just, that feeling of like panic, like, oh my God, what's happened? What did he do? I'm in so much trouble and I don't even know what I did. Like I was overcome with that. And I went online and my parents were staying with me at that point to just, kind of help me with the girls and everything. And we all figured out that he had gone on the air and decided to make his own announcement that we were getting divorced. And not only were we getting divorced, but that I was a horrible person who for months had been keeping the children from him. I had cleaned out our savings account. I had cleaned out the safe and had kicked him out of the house and completely left him high and dry. And he never saw it coming. He can't see his children. He was literally crying on the air. And years later, Danny told me that he had index cards and wrote out on them notes like when to cry, what happened next. And it was 100% fabricated. It was a narrative that he decided to create. I mean, Sarah, you must know, like there's just been, oh my gosh, I have hundreds of stories of when he just, for some reason, he got so lost in his paranoia and OCD or whatever it was that he thought it'd be better to create a crazy false narrative rather than just tell the truth. Because the truth wasn't that bad. People get divorced all the time.
I can't even remember. I don't know what happened, but I just remember the time when he faked he was locked in an elevator because
that's what I was thinking of. So that's when we were, and I'm sure we'll get into that once we fast forward, but that's when we were actually in court together. And he didn't want anybody to know, but so he faked that he got stuck in an elevator and that's why he wasn't on the air. Little did he know there was a reporter from the Washington Post sitting in the courtroom, who then put two and two together that these are the tweets. He's locked in an elevator. Here he is in a courtroom dealing with this matter and made it public. But that really echoes to where his mental health was, That's somebody who is just destroying themselves in spite of themselves. He couldn't help that. He was really lost there.
Yeah. And, to your point, I know we were talking a little bit about people trying to help him. I mean, in a way, I don't know what it would have taken. He just was like, cause you're right. Like it was almost like he just couldn't help it. He couldn't.
Like, I don't think he could.
You got the PR person. I mean, I do remember people giving him advice. It was like, he couldn't even do it. Like it just would become this huge fabricated paranoia. I mean, so, you start to go through this very public divorce. You are painted as taking advantage of him as, when of course now 10 years later, the truth has come to light. Right. I mean, but I'm curious, were your parents so terrified for you? I mean, I think I met your mom and your stepdad.
Yeah,
I mean, they must have been.
I think they were. I think they were really sad and really scared. Gosh, it was such a horrible time because it's traumatizing enough when your husband leaves you and all of a sudden you're left with this realization that I have these children to care for and I'm completely on my own. But I lived in this I can't even think of an adjective, this unspeakable fear of what's going to happen today. What is he going to do today to terrorize me? And I think my parents knew that was, not an exaggeration, but was absolutely the reality I was living in. And they did their best to try and protect me as much as they could. But, I remember my stepdad at one point, because we couldn't figure out how he was knowing things. He would know things about like that there were a lot of packages at the doorstep and, would send me some text about I was irresponsible because I left packages out, and we're like, how does he know this? Is he watching? And my stepdad went through my computer and logged into my like ADT account and found out that Peter was watching me through the alarm system cameras, inside and outside of the house, the system that he had set up. And you're able to see every time somebody logs in, and he was logging in 12, 15 times a day, watching the cameras. And the times he was watching them, funny enough, were actually when it was just me and the girls were visiting with him. So it had nothing to do with protecting the children or anything. I think he was just completely obsessed about it. So I lived in just horrible fear every single day about what am I going to wake up to today that's happened? Because it was a relentless attack, like you talked about. The reason everybody kind of dropped off and, never wanted to associate with him again is because they knew how vindictive he could be. And it was pretty terrible. At that same time, it's funny, I've spoken some about, Peter's addiction to whether it was the pills or alcohol, but I was taking medication from a back injury that I had and back pain that I was having. And this was before, everything came out about the opioid epidemic and how dangerous they are. So I was one of those people that doctors were just filling it for. And I realize in hindsight now that I started taking pills to cope, for emotional pain instead of physical pain. So then I got swept up in addiction to opioids. And it was just a horrible time. And my heart breaks for what my poor girls must have been going through at the time. They were probably 3 and 5, 4 and 6. And it wasn't safe for them anywhere, whether they were with me or with him, because we were all just falling apart in this like sea of hate. It was a really, really dark time.
Okay. How did you know that you had a problem? How did you know? I mean, I don't know. I hate that you went through that. Cause like I said, when I met you, you just were like this, like light, just this like light, this beautiful spirit. And it's like, I just saw over the years, like how you were always such a great mother. You still are. You were such a good mother. That's all you wanted to be. You're so good to them. I mean, they're going to appreciate even more how strong you are 10 years from now. But man, I mean, how did you know you had a problem? How did you know you had to get help?
Here's the funny thing about addiction. And, I'd like to circle back to this later once we get into, Peter's final days, but I cannot, anything I say is going to be an understatement about the power of denial. When you are in the midst of it, the addiction is so strong that you will rationalize any horrible thing that has happened, whether you've gotten in a car accident because of, your addiction, or you're losing your job, or, your children are telling you that you've passed out, all these like vivid, bright red flags that something is going on, and you will rationalize reasons why it's okay. So I was very much stuck in that until, Peter obviously found out about it, through tracking my prescriptions, or he had private investigators that were constantly following me everywhere. So he decided to use that against me to get custody. And I've never gone public about this because it is so shameful, but I'm okay with it now because I know that it wasn't some sort of moral inability of mine. It's not because I was a bad person that I fell into this addiction. So I'll talk about it now so it helps somebody else. But it took going to court and having a judge tell me that if I didn't get help, I was not going to see my girls again.
Mm.
And I remember the night before we were going to go to court, and I had fought with my lawyers. I had, my own doctors were testifying on my behalf that, yeah, she's misused it some, but I don't think she needs to be like shipped off to rehab or anything. We can wean her off and work through this. We had a good, strong case. And I remember the night before we went to court, and I got on my knees. My faith is very important to me. And I remember I just turned it over to God. And I said, if you need to take the girls away so that I'll get better, I'll say yes. I'm not going to pray that I win tomorrow in court. I'm just going to pray that the right thing happens. So, yeah. And that's what happened is I was forced to get help, and thank God that happened. Because who knows, I very easily could have gotten in a car accident or overdosed, or, who knows how long that would have taken me to hit rock bottom if I didn't have Peter, chomping at my heels to take me down. Him taking me down actually forced me to get better, which then me getting better gave me the strength to survive that horrible, dark place I was in. Once I went to treatment, and it was, oh my gosh, I'm going to write about this on my blog at some point, because I took a lot of journal entries while I was doing it. It was really hard work. And I had Peter trying to sabotage the whole thing while I was there. And it was really hard, but it saved my life, and I came out of that. And I remember I went to my first meeting at the DuPont Circle Club in DC, and I was so terrified, like, to walk in there. And I found a new family there that helped me just start over and find myself again, find myself in spite of whatever he threw at me. And one day at a time, I got stronger. I got more positive. That light that you talked about, that you saw in me when you met me, it started to shine through my eyes again. I remember looking in the mirror during that dark time and not recognizing the person that I saw. And she came back, and she didn't just come back. She came back as a woman, as a strong woman who could stand on her own 2 feet, who could make something of herself, who could not only survive this, but could learn to thrive in it. So if I hadn't have hit that rock bottom, I think it would have just been surviving. It wouldn't have been thriving, which is what I've been able to do.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm a mess. Oh my God, that's so beautiful.
Oh.
Look, there are people listening to this that, like you said at the beginning, are in it. When you talk about it, it's like, oh man. I mean, I remember what he was like to me, but I mean, you had it 3 times, 4 times worse. And it's like, I don't think some people listening to this will get it. And then I feel like, God, there'll be people, they will never understand how, I mean, there were really good parts of him, but there was just this it was relentless. It was so, and to me, I look at you and I think, no, I mean, any one of us, I mean, you, for the grace of God, you are here. I mean, most of us would have died. I mean, he was that intense. It
was a relentless cruelty that, unless you experienced it, we could tell 100 stories. Danny's told her story. And you
oh my God, Mel,
you can't understand it unless you were living in it. It's just a relentless cruelty that will break you down. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to break me down in the end.
Wow. Do you feel like you can do anything now? I mean, I feel like you can do anything, girl. Like, I mean, you lived, and I mean, the hardest part people don't understand is there are women, I mean, 100% at home crying, listening to this, dealing with a man. And it's not just men. I mean, there are a lot of women that are awful to men too. So there's some men listening to this, but I mean, there are women just like crying, listening to this, because it's like, I don't know. I mean, how do you see the light? And then You deserve so much credit. You deserve so much credit to be here, sitting here today.
I mean, honestly, Sarah, and I'm not just saying this to sound like, some humble, jackass, but it's not me. Without my faith, I never would have made it to be able to say these words to you today. God had a bigger plan for my life. I'm still not sure exactly where it's going to go. I'm just following blindly and faithfully, one little step at a time. Like this opportunity came up, you and I have stayed friends, and you said, why don't we do this? And I prayed about it and it felt right. And it's just like one little step at a time. I know that it's turning into this bigger, greater plan that God had for me.
I got goosebumps. I was like, I got goosebumps just that when you talked about overcoming addiction. I mean, I was just like, oh my God, she's just, I don't know what it is, a book or something. I mean,